can get started. Oh my goodness. A couple of notifications, RSVPs. Yeah, that's all fine. No one's stranded. If they are, they can call me. All right. How's the sound, Alan? Yeah? Great. So, who's actually involved with a kind of a maker project that they're working on? Are they, kind of like actually taking a product to market? I think you can. You're doing a great job. Who's kind of in the process of maybe kind of planning a crowdfunding campaign or involved in a kind of a DIY thingy? Okay. Cool. Yeah? What are you working on?
Hackathon thing that me and my friend did when I was in Belfast. It's just a charity thing.
But is it a connected device? No? Okay. Welcome. Okay, we're about to get started. I'm kind of a little bit exhausted. It's been an intense day. So first of all, sincere apologies for all the recent dramas. As you may have been made aware through, hopefully, the notifications through the forum and social media that there was a fire at Napier University, so the entire campus was shut down, and we were kind of put in this kind of purgatory scenario where the fire were doing kind of an audit, doing safety checks, and there was a possibility that in fact the campus was going to be made available to us. So literally switching to this venue, finding a venue at such short notice and getting everyone notified of the switch is kind of miraculous under the circumstances. So I'm so grateful that you actually made the effort to go through the pain and hassle to the Edinburgh College of Art, and thank you so much to Edinburgh College of Art Informatics for letting us have this venue at short notice. So we're still in a sort of state of flux. We've got the live broadcast up and running. Millions of people are tuning in this very moment. Only kidding, don't worry about it, no pressure, Ben. Now Ben is a hardware entrepreneur.
And software.
This is the second time we've invited you back, which is kind of a big deal because no one in the entire history of the Internet of Things Edinburgh recently rebranded as the Internet of Things Scotland meetup because we like to do more events throughout Scotland, Dundee possibly, Glasgow and so on. So you are the first speaker that's been invited back.
Honored.
And the reason for that is that Ben has gone through an incredible journey from Genesis through to funding, crowdfunding, prototype, product, and distribution, which is possibly the hardest thing, and not just distribution, I won't give too much away, but distribution through one of the most valuable brands in the world, beginning with A, kind of a fruit shape, which is astonishing for any startup, let alone a couple of academics based in Edinburgh. So we're starting to build this incredible ecosystem, and they say hardware is hard. And I think that's probably true because you've got so many additional logistical challenges from just simply designing the packaging, finding someone to make the thing and scale it up to mass production. So technically and logistically, it's very, very challenging. Whereas software apps and software in general, it's not easy by any stretch. But I would say there are certain unique challenges with regards to launching a hardware product, in this case, a connected hardware product. So I won't go on any further. Ben will do his talk, and then our second speaker is going to be joining us via Skype because she's in Warsaw, but she's based in New York, and she is a mind hacker, and she helps entrepreneurs optimize their software programs in a way that's pretty darn interesting, actually. But like I said, I'm not going to give away too much more. So I'd like to hand over to Ben, Skoog Music.
Thank you.
Round of applause, why not?
Let me just get a backdrop on the go here, if that's all right. Can I do this? Because it's always nice to have some pretty pictures. There we go. So Skoog, right? This is the current Skoog. It's a tactile, cubic musical instrument, created for kids and stuff. But I had a fancy multimedia, 3D, virtual reality presentation prepared for you. But in the transition, things got kind of messed up. And it actually made me think, that what Simon actually asked me to come and talk about was funding and the route that gives. And whilst, I'm happy to talk hours about our product, I think what's more relevant, and I mean, you guys aren't here necessarily to buy it, although it is available in the Apple Store on Princes Street, so do go and buy one, okay? But it's more about the journey and more particularly about funding. So kind of ruined my intro that I'd been working on. So yeah, how did two academics based in Leith, right, end up selling globally through the Apple Store, right? Obviously, genius ideas, right? An incredible talent, but more importantly, supportive funders and supportive investors. Now, we've been through the kind of pretty much, I think, the whole gamut of kind of startup life. And I would still classify us as a startup, although we're very old. I'm not sure when you stop being I think when you start making money, that's probably when you stop being a startup. But, we've done VC, we've done equity loan, we've done crowdfunding, we've done a range of different things to stay alive, to bring new things to life, to meet the challenges that this kind of world faces. And particularly, as Simon said, hardware is difficult. There's many a time that David, my co-founder and business partner, who, he is a software guy, has routinely said, I wish we didn't make it, Why can't we just do software? This would be so much easier. But there's a delight and there's a challenge and there's something magical about making things. And I think the whole maker revolution that's going on right now, and I heard people they're all talking about hackathons. When we started, there weren't such thing as hackathons. You lucky young people, you, okay? So, yeah, we started out, this journey started out 10 years ago. And we set out to create an instrument that was specifically designed for children. But more importantly, one that would involve all children. So it had to be accessible to kids with disabilities, as well as more able kids. That presented some challenges. And we decided to overcome those challenges by creating a box, a cube. There's loads of stuff on why this is so kind of, why it works. But it works well enough for it to be picked up by one of the bigger brands around. So we now, with a new version, are working closely with Apple, who have been incredibly supportive, and we retail globally online with them, and we're now in about 80% of retail stores in Europe, which is pretty cool. And yeah, so I'm here to tell you a little bit more about the funding journey to get there. So supportive funders, and whether you're doing VC investment, whether it's angel, whether it's family and friends, all kinds of different ways of getting stuff backed up, whether it's a crowdfunding thing, I think one of the things that we've definitely learned, and the thing that I would, if I could pass on anything, is be communicative. Keep them informed. There are different schools of thought with investors and boards and these kind of things, and some people, different ways of dealing with that, and it depends on who you have on your board. But if people know what's happening, if they know what's going on, if they know the challenges that you're facing, then they're so much more likely to be supportive. And it's partly about this narrative, this thing about engaging people in your journey. It's one of the beautiful things about crowdfunding, is that people don't just invest in you and the product, they invest in the narrative. They invest in being part of something, to bring it to life, and to be part of that journey. And so, being late can actually, facing a new challenge can be something that everyone gets involved in and celebrates, as opposed to going, you're late, where's my dongle? You know what I mean? So on the funding and investment side, when we started off, part of our original research, that kind of program we did was, in 2008, there's two of us, we left the kind of research that we were doing. We had a picture, literally, of the thing we wanted to make. We had a mock-up made out of upholstery foam that looked like one of these guys had made it, but I'm sure they could probably do better, right? And we hit the mean streets of Edinburgh and the investment scene. And it's I think the climate has changed now, particularly with kind of crowdfunding stuff. But, you have your idea, and it's very easy to be really protective because you're worried about your IP. And particularly if you are going for investment, say, then you're worried about protecting what is investable and be able to kind of access that. But the key thing is to get out there and start talking to people, okay? And talking to people about what you're doing. And as soon as you start telling people about what you're doing, people will help you. It's a weird thing, but most people will want to help you, okay? And as Simon mentioned at the beginning, there is starting to grow a really supportive community in Scotland and around Edinburgh. Although, scary fact, right? And this is true, and this is why you maybe, I would suggest when you're starting your journey, have a little bit more of a global outlook. Uber, as a single company, has received more investment than the entire startup community in the UK last year, which is pretty scary, okay? And that's just one. And there is a big difference in how things are funded, but there's big difference in how things scale up in terms of US versus UK and that kind of thing. And the largest thing can be quite scary, but it's much more of a global approach. So, how did we end up getting where we are today, which is in this great position, with a great partnership with Apple? Supportive funders. So when we first started, we started kind of going out, and there are several networks in Scotland, in the UK, and things like this are fantastic. But get involved like you're doing. But we went through something called Link Scotland, and it's literally a kind of, you sign up and then you go out and you do pitches, and they pull together rooms of people with money, and you say, please can I have some? And they go, no, and you go, okay, I'll see you later, right? And go get something else, And it's basically like Dragon's Den style kind of pitching. You get wheeled through. And we actually got our first round of money from the first pitch we ever did, which was lucky, because we got quite jaded by the end of it. You do 20 or 30 of these things. But there are all these networks. So don't sit on your idea. Don't be scared to talk to people about it. Get out, ask the questions. And the other thing, and so we managed to raise about 400,000 in the first instance, got our first kind of round in about 2010. Took a while. And we began, and one of the things that was, and I think this actually reflects, interestingly, on what's happening now with crowdfunding and the kind of maker revolution, that when we actually got our funding, came to market, part of the brief for our original project was to create a commercial prototype, something that had to be able to go to market very quickly. So we were constrained in the development by having to use off-the-shelf electronics. So positive of that is CE marked, everything's ready to go, you stick it in the box, boom, you can go to market. But when we had the investment, that was one of our pitch positives, was to say, well, we can get this straight out there, and it's ready to go. But which meant it did go straight out, and there was less thought put into how do we sell this, how do we market this. We had customers already, which is a great thing. And again, with crowdfunding as well, you'd run a crowdfunding thing, and I'll talk about the one a couple that we've done later a little bit. You've got customers and you're out, but as soon as you have customers, you have to start supporting them as well. And you have to think about how are you going to support them? Are they international? Where are they based? What languages do you need? What kind of documentation do you need? And did you know that China has completely different safety testing rules than anyone else? Okay? If you're thinking of selling in China, just be careful. CE doesn't cut it. They have entirely their own compliance standards and laws. And they're actually, interestingly, stricter than everyone else. Okay? And it costs more. But be careful of that, because China is a big growing market as well, particularly for tech, It's somewhere where you kind of want to be, but there are different challenges. So we got our first round of investment. We went straight to market. We started producing, started shipping. We had customers, which then we tied us in. And we'll tie you in. As soon as you have customers, you're involved in customer support. But the positive side of that is getting feedback on your product. Finding out what people are doing it, finding out what's wrong, what's right, what works, what doesn't, making the changes you need to change, evolve that. The nice thing about things like Indiegogo is that you can pre-fund a manufacturing run. You can maybe even do it in a short run, because you can change the pricing structure because of the overhead change, because you're bringing the cash flow forward, all these different types of things, which means that if there is an issue, you can change it and fix it, and you're not stuck with 250,000 units that are just not compatible with the new iPhone size, okay, when it gets released and they change the form factor. Happens quite a lot. But so VC funding, make sure that you're open and willing to create a dialogue and keep that dialogue going, I would say, with investors, whether it's a firm or whether it's an individual. And we have a mix of both. We've got a range of different individual investors, private investors. We have a professional VC firm. And it's all about keeping them informed. And sometimes, you can, when you start off and you have a board or you have your first kind of set of investors on board, it's like being in the headmaster's office. They're like, what did you spend our money on this month? You're like, oh, I'm really sorry, I spent it on this and then that, and I feel bad and stuff. Okay, so, but they're not there. They're there because they're involved. They put their money in and they want to see it work, and they more than likely have skills and connections that can help you. So be communicative. Okay, make sure you're asking for what you need. And I did a recent talk at Creative Edinburgh, and it was about what lessons have you learned. And I think the two main things, other than communication, is ask for what you need. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Another thing that occurred to me recently is, and I think it's probably been written about a lot, but entrepreneurs they're optimists. Okay, you have to be. There is no option. You can't do this if you're a pessimist. You may as well just no bother, I'm going to bed. You're optimists. You're like, yeah, let's do this. But as a result, you can tend to underestimate what is required of the job ahead. You're like, we can do this for £20,000. No way, yeah, we can. We can all just wear the same clothes and it'll be fine, right? Whatever you're thinking about, whatever you first start planning, double it. And that's not in a kind of aggressive or flippant way. Seriously, double it. And it may not be enough, even at that point. And it's partly to do with the mindset of being an entrepreneur, because you believe you can do it, and of course you can, and you probably could do it on a shoestring, and doubling it will be a shoestring. But really think about what it is you need, and it's that kind of, a lot of us, particularly in Britain, and I think it's demonstrative of kind of different kind of cultures. In the UK, it's one is embarrassed to ask for money. One is embarrassed even to talk about money with other people. We don't actually. It's a dirty question. But in this business that we're in, you need to talk about money, and you need to ask for what you need, and you need options to kind of increase that. You need places to go, and you have to be upfront about what people are getting into. And then, so moving on, so we had VC investment, we managed to get the product out, we were shipping, we were learning how to sell it, and around about 2013, we managed to get a foot in the door at Apple. Now, the way that we did that is partly to do with what we do in terms of accessibility, working with kids, our design ethos, and where we're from, partly serendipity, about meeting people at the right time, the right place. And you could argue that you work hard doing what you do and putting yourself out there to be in the right time at the right place. But it's why networking is so important. And I used to be I have poo-pooed the networking, okay? All right? I've been one of those terrible people. But it's so important. Without that, we certainly wouldn't be where we are today. And it's just through connections and knowing people we managed to get in the door. And then our product did the talking, and we managed to get some stuff going on, and we started to build this relationship. And then our investors kept supporting us. You keep communicating, you keep asking, and obviously they want to make sure that what they've put in is going to be used effectively, and that you can support that. But the more forward thought you can give that, and I think that's another really important thing. It's so consuming, and particularly in the hardware kind of world, where you kind of have to plan ahead and you're thinking about runs and how you get things out there. You get very much consumed in that physical thing, or software as well. It's no different really, I suppose. And supplying and delivering it, that it's hard to think, 6 months, 12 months, 3 years. And you do your first business plan and it's got a 5-year projection and it looks like a hockey stick and everyone's like, yeah, we're going to make millions, okay, right? And I hope you do, and I'm sure you will, but it's not necessarily always like that. And so, but once you start rolling, once you have customers, once you start supporting them, it's very difficult to step back. But keeping that long view, keeping time each month to stand back and go, right, what are we going to need in 6 months? Because it will come really quickly and it will bite you. But if you can get ahead of that and think, I reckon we're going to need some help. It doesn't necessarily need to be money. It can be connections. It can be links into other networks. It can be new channels. It can be opportunities in the market. It can be distributors. It can be whatever it needs to be. But try and take the time to step back from the project that you're in. Remove yourself a little bit and try and eyeball it from afar and go, whoa, that looks grim. We should do something about that. We should ask someone for some help with that. Okay. So we started shipping the first product on Apple in 2013, and it became very quickly apparent to us, as it did Apple, that the product, although the concept is fantastic, we needed to make it. It wasn't wireless. It didn't work with the iPad. It was USB only. It cost too much. It was £400, £500. And so we began working on another deep development phase. And we were able to do that, again, with the support of investors. Because once you start shifting between development, you're selling, okay, that's fine. But if you need to shift back into development, undoubtedly, and unless you've got a team of 20 or 30, it always amuses me when I see any company that has a team doing things. Because, there's still only 4 or 5 of us in the whole, and it's like, so you're speaking to someone and they go, yeah, we'll get the iOS team on that. And you're like, team? We've got like half a guy doing customer support, or 3/4 of a lady doing kind of, accounts or whatever it is. And it's like, teams? Whole people, more than whole people doing single jobs. That is just genius. Who would ever thought that would work, okay? So, you have to be adaptive. So keep your funders informed, be adaptive to what you're doing, try and have a long view, but keep that long view going. Always try and utilize the experience of the board that you have, even if it may not seem relevant to the industry that you're in. Because people that have been around, and business skills are transferable. So someone may not be, you may have an investor that has come from oil and they're kind of investing in tech, say, and you're like, well, what did they know about digitized plant home growing networks? All right? And people are doing that now, apparently. And it's like, they may not know specific things about that, but a lot of the general things about kind of business practices are quite transferable skill sets, all right? And they'll know stuff that you don't know if they've been around. We then, through the development phase, it's difficult to sell and develop at the same time, which is often, I think, in terms of, I think it's great to get out to market, but there is a difficult thing about when you do it. And sometimes, Guy Kawasaki always says, ship it first, fix it later. And I would kind of subscribe to that. But maybe ask yourself a couple of times before you ship it. Is it really ready now? And maybe give yourself a couple of chances. We, in the last stages in terms of running up to this, so we were trying to make it wireless and work with the iPad. And we ended up getting some help from another kind of business person who was like, why don't you just crowdfund the rest of this to accelerate what you're doing, and it's these new platforms. And our investors were suspicious of that at the time because it was these new things, and crowdfunding was kind of very much an odd thing to them as VC investors. They're like, well, how does this work? How does our equity? It's like, well, no, it's fine. We're just pre-selling product. We're just bringing cash forward, which is another really, really interesting thing of doing with crowdfunding. But if you're bringing that cash forward in your business, funding-wise, you have to make sure that where you've taken it from, there's something else to fill its place. Okay, so again, the long view. It's not just about the single campaign. And the one thing that I would say that I've definitely learned from crowdfunding is if it cannot be your only thing financially, then it will work better for you. If it's just crowdfunding that you're working with, then it can be incredibly difficult. And the point being, and if you don't make it onto in demand, or you're not able to kind of realize revenue after the point, and you're focused on shipping that and having to those customers supply them, that really puts you in a very difficult situation. It can really constrain your resources. So again, think about the long view. How are you going to, although you've brought that cash forward in terms of product, you're still going to have those things to deal with later. So thinking forward. So we ran a crowdfunding campaign thinking we were fantastic, and we failed quite dramatically. Okay? Because one of the things that is important to know about crowdfunding, and I'm sure people from Indiegogo are watching now and they will crack down on me and Kickstarter, but there's a lot of stuff put around it marketing-wise about traffic and these kind of things. But one of the most important things that you can do with your crowdfunding campaign is ensure that the traffic going to your crowdfunding page is going to convert. The conversion rate on the visits is what really drives your ratings and helps with your publicity. If you get in fantastic PR and drive loads of visits to your site, it can effectively kill a campaign. So you have to be clever about how you do it. Have a landing page that is in between what you're doing PR-wise and your actual site to purchase and support. So people who are just generally interested can go and find out about it, and it's not as if they're really going to actually back it, that actually go to it. Happy to chat through things like that as well. Anyway, we did really well on the PR on the first one, not so well on the funding, okay? So we picked ourselves up, And the other great thing about crowdfunding as well, and this is, I think, really important on all sides of this, these things are so consuming to you. You know, it's your life, it's your baby, it's your business. But majority of time, people, you know, we did a crowdfunding campaign, and we thought, oh, we failed, you know, we're not going to be able to do it again. It's like, A, no one cares, right? And next week, you will still be new. Unless you've had a really global, you know, you've sold millions of units and then not shipped them or something, you know. But majority of times, what you've done will be turned over so quickly, people won't know. And also, if you have kept people informed about what you're doing, they won't mind. And they will still support you. So we turned it around, we did another one, we learned quickly, we changed the way we did the PR, and then we've succeeded fantastically. Got what we needed, brought the product to market, and then we're late, really quite late, I think about 9 months late. But, I mean, I think, you know, there's certain refunds that have to be made, there's certain things you have to kind of account for, but we kept communicating with the customers, and people run crowdfunding, but if you keep in touch with them, if you keep them part of that journey, because they're like investors, people who take part in crowdfunding, in a small way, but again, keeping them informed, let people know what you're doing, and the majority of the time, they're forgiving and they'll support you. And through that, you know, we managed to do the development we needed, and then we got to the point where we were still working with Apple, and they came to us and said, would you like to launch this globally with us? We said, yes, please. But at the same time, you know, an organization like that faces lots of challenges working. We're still a small company, right? We've got 5 full-time employees. We're based in an office in Leith. We still make the product in Scotland. Short run, low volume manufacture, very expensive. A lot of challenges. And working with someone like Apple who can turn around and say, well, we need, you know, 2,000 units, you know, next week. Can you do that? And you're like, yeah, of course. Like, how are we going to do that? Right? But you say yes or these things initially, but then you communicate, and by communicating with them and saying, well, okay, that's great. But as a distributor and as a channel, you say, well, look, but that presents certain challenges to us. And again, this idea of keeping people informed and saying, well, we can do that, but we're going to have to do it over we're going to have to ditch this over, we're going to have to spread it over 5 or 6 weeks. We're going to have to do various different changes. And again, even a company like Apple are like, okay, well, if you keep us informed, if you let us know what you're doing so that we can plan. And again, it's that trying to step back and appreciate the kind of ecosystem around you. Not just in a time-wise and financially, but the people that you're impacting on and the people that you need support from. And if you ask, 9 times out of 10, they'll give you the support that you need. And if you don't ask and you sit there in a sulk, then you know what? You're going to sit there in a sulk and be alone. But yeah, try and be aware of what you need. Ask for more, okay? Because it's going to cost more. There are things that you won't know. There's challenges you're going to face. Don't be scared talking about your ideas. Don't be shy about bringing them into the open. Not everyone is out to kind of rip you off. In fact, most people are doing their own thing, okay? But communicating and making people aware of where you are and also where you're trying to get to and what your ambitions really are. And if you are really ambitious, don't try and think, oh, I better temper this because people might not want me to be successful. Then maybe the investors won't believe me if I think we're going to do really well. And it's like, but that's what people want. That's what's required of you. And whilst it's important to be optimistic, try and inject a little bit, step back and get a little bit of realism now and then. I think I've probably spoken more than long enough. But I think we'll hang around for questions after. Is that the drill?
We're going to do an expert panel.
In just a moment.
You're invited.
But the important thing at the end of all of this is that, so we're a small company, we're based in Leith, we've had various different types of funding, we've done a lot of stuff ourselves, had loads of help, and as a result of that, we're retailing globally with Apple. In fact, we're off out to Cupertino next week to go talk about some other things, some interesting projects, and it's all still made in Leith. So who'd have thought it? Eh? Thanks.
Cool. Right.
I can talk more if you want.
So I'm just going to give Patricia the heads up.
Okay.
And let's just do a quick Q&A.
Okay.
Why not?
No worries.
Just go with it. I'll see.
Right.
Questions from the audience. Sorry, by the way, I was listening to your talk. I don't want you thinking that I was kind of tuning out and being really rude, because I'm always aware of that, the fact that, I'm kind of attached to my phone.
I assumed you were tweeting about how good it was.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was interacting with social media, and yeah, it's because we've got the live feed and so on, we're getting a really good response. So just wanted to feed that back to you.
So questions, there was one here, quick first, yeah?
You mentioned it's been 10 years of development, and over that period I was wondering, how did you kind of sustain yourself? Did you at some point this my full-time job?
Well, so the original project started 10 years ago, and I was working in academia at the time as a lecturer in developmental psychology. So, you piggyback stuff off the research grants that you have as an academic. And you get the research grant for the thing you say you're going to get. And then you do all the other stuff. And then when it comes to near the end of the project, you do the stuff that you were funded to do. Isn't that how it works still? That's certainly how it worked when I was doing it, right? But there came a point in the research kind of world in that where we were trying to keep it going as a social philanthropic kind of research kind of endeavor. And we couldn't get the money. And we said, we think we have something of worth here. We think we have something of value. We think it's going to make meaning. And people will pay for it. And so we quit our day jobs at the university and went for that. And there have been times we've been self-sustaining. There's a lot of things where we've managed to raise money and have funding and have salaries, and there's times when we haven't. But we've managed to maintain our staff through that. And again, even in terms of having employees, keeping them informed, making sure you're upfront and honest with them about the situation that you're in and what the plans are. You communicate with people, and you can make it through stuff. So, yeah, arrange. Okay. I'll prepare it myself.
I'm thinking about the moment. It's when you're pricing your product, knowing that it's a product for good, so people get a benefit. This is the target audience who will benefit from this. Clearly, you need to make money, you need to pay for it, and then there's the more people that get this, the more benefit it will have to.
Okay, this. So you're doing something good. You want to. I mean, for us, sort of accessibility, we want to make it as affordable as we want everyone to have it. We want to give it away. Luckily, one important thing in all of this is if you can have a business partner who has possibly a different viewpoint to you. That's really helpful. Not in terms of concern, but just a different way of coming at things. Is that a fire alarm?
Seriously.
Come on now. That's one thing. But no, so that has been a real challenge for us. The equivalent product when we started was $3,000. So that helped, that we were kind of 500 quid. But even then, our investors and the other channels we were working with, they were like, why are you charging so little for this? And we were like, well, we're ashamed to charge anyone for it. It's that kind of, we want to help, we want to give it away. But the thing that we got to, and the thing that definitely I got to, was that, and getting out and talking to people about it, is that if it is good, if it has value, and if it makes meaning in the world, people will pay for it. People will pay for stuff that doesn't, right? More importantly, people will buy headphones with cat ears, okay?
How about the selfie shoe?
Whatever.
Always gets
I don't
the
know.
fabulous thing I've ever seen.
There is stuff that people will
You
pay
can
for.
actually attach your phone to your shoe.
But I think that's a really important thing. So people will pay stuff that doesn't make meaning. So you have to, and it is, you're just like, well, does this affect this kind of social element of what I'm doing? But people will pay, council will pay, funding will pay for things that are good and make the world a better place. And it's okay to ask. And again, this idea of asking for what you need. It's okay to ask for money. And people expect you to live and eat and be able to do what you do. And ideally to be able to evolve it and support it. And that's the other thing. It's that kind of having your own view. It's like, well, we're going to need to charge this for it because we need these people to help make this work. And it's not just about that single point purchase, which I think the crowdfunding side of things can make things difficult because it's very much on that, we're going to make this, it's going to cost this, we're going to make a bit of money and then we'll supply it and then we're done. But that whole process around that and then the support and delivering it and packaging and then safety tech and all those kind of things that kind of spiral out around it really requires a lot more. So really you have to think about your pricing, but you have to, it's a slightly bitter pill, but it's okay. Okay?
All right. So, round of applause. So let's see how this works. We're going to call our mind hacker. I believe she's kind of a bit of a globe trotter. She's based in New York. I need to. Where's the sound input? Hey, I'm just trying to find the sound, which was connected, but someone unplugged it. So just one.
I unplugged it.
Oh, you grabbed the sound, did you? Alan. Sorry, Alan had the lead. We're kind of going with it at the moment, so just bear with us.
No problem.
It's been one of those days. What can I tell you? Yeah, that's what we need. Apparently that's what I'm supposed to do. Okay, sound check. Say something. Can I hear you or no? Okay. I think it's one of these inputs. Oh, we've got AV mute. Maybe that's it. Just start pressing buttons randomly. See what happens. Keep saying something.
Sing us a song.
Okay, I can see your lips. Can you hear me? You can hear me. Hello. It's not definitely been muted. That one there. Hello? What the heck?
There we go.
Okay.
You check the audio preferences on Skype itself, or are they?
And the other thing is just do it through.
Sorry, your laptop's out of presentation. You need to get it set up as a
So that's in settings, is it?
Could
Is
be
that
in
in
the,
settings?
well, it could be in settings, the audio settings of Skype.
Oh, it's settings in Skype. Okay, that's the
If
microphone.
you press escape, no, press escape and it's up in the.
You're a Mackie, aren't you?
Yeah, up in Skype and then
Yeah.
up to the left, preferences, Skype preferences, and then check the audio video. Built-in microphone, ringing volume, built-in
Speaker, there
output.
you go.
It's saying it's
Drop
built-in
down.
output. That's here, isn't it?
Well, just do the drop down, see what happens.
Display port.
port.
That would be the one that's coming out to you.
Give it a shot.
Hello. Yeah, have we got sound?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
Yeah?
Thanks,
Yay!
Okay, we're gonna maximize.
Can you do me a favor and lower the camera so that
Yeah,
I
yeah.
see?
I'm gonna do that in a sec. I just wanted to make sure
Say
everything.
like directly people.
There we go.
Okay.
How
We
is
all
that?
those animals, so I need to get feedback.
Perfect.
Okay, so can everybody hear me and see me?
Yeah.
Right. So Simon, you want to introduce me or am I just supposed to start?
I did an intro actually before you went online. So just tell everyone where you are because you seem to move around quite a bit. So location would be a good starting point. And then move into what the heck is a mind hacker? Something to do with upgrading your mental software. I mean, you can use technical jargon. Who would regard themselves as technical in the room? Raise your hand. Not me. So, okay, don't get too technical, but still a little bit technical. Use the computer as an analogy and so on. I think we
I will.
just about get a head around that. All right, over to you.
Okay, so I'm currently in Warsaw. I just ran the Berlin Marathon. If anybody was there, high five. If not, you're missing out. I normally live in New York, between New York and San Francisco. I have a lot of clients in Silicon Valley. And I can actually hear myself, which is, that echo is slightly annoying. So I'm just,
Solve that.
it's okay.
Can you? Yeah, if you mute your microphone or?
I'm gonna, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you can mute your
Yes.
speakers.
Okay, so I have muted myself, so if you want to ask questions, you just have to let me know, which is much better. I can hear myself. So I live between New York City and San Francisco. I am originally from Poland, where I am right now, on my way back to New York City via London, via Berlin. And so I want to start a little bit. Give me a second. I have notes here. I don't have much time, so I really don't have. I'm just going to give you kind of the framework of what we mean by mind hacking. Now, I'll start by talking a little bit about myself and what and who is Self Hackathon. Then what is the framework for mind hacking? And then finally, since this is a meetup about fundraising and IoT, I'm going to talk a little bit about money, because I think money is this concept that actually is much more psychological than we think. And it turns out a lot of people have issues talking about money, asking for money. It seems to be a very intimate topic for a lot of people, and we've been trying to hack that a little bit. And some of my clients include, fintech companies and major investment banks and insurance companies. So we've been kind of playing with that a little bit and bringing much more psychology to that topic. But a little bit about myself, who's sitting in front of you. My name is Patricia, and I'm a psychologist. My background is experimental social psychology. I spent more than 10 years researching, I call it the dark side of the human nature, because I study was on genocide. I lecture. I say I moved into the world of entrepreneurship. I started a couple companies. Eventually moving into the space that I call mind hacking, which is pretty much the idea is how do we take all the scientific knowledge and apply it into fields that usually don't have psychology inherently in them. And most of our clients include Fortune 500 companies, a lot of startups. We work with a lot of accelerators, as well as individual clients. The underlying basis is that success is a mind game, and it happens here, 6 inches between the ears, which is 20 centimeters between the ears, which is pretty much your mind. And if this is set straight, then everything else falls from there. And so our recent focus has been money, actually. And funny enough, Simon asked me to speak about it, and I was like, I can talk about this topic forever because it is so emotionally charged for so many people. How many of you think there's deep psychology to money, such as fear, shame, anxiety, etc.? Raise of hands. Okay. Much more. Okay. Since I work a lot with Silicon Valley companies, and I work a lot with founders who raise money, who have raised money, I notice a lot of my research has been about the body and how kind of body, a lot of things are embodied inside the body. We've been noticing that there is a particular shift when people start talking about money. And we link that shift to a lot of psychological state, one of which is shame. And so something we've been working a lot recently is the deep psychology of money. But I won't go into that. I'm more than happy. You can email me and I can share some research with you because I think it's absolutely, utterly fascinating what money is for people. And we're going to dive a little bit into that today because I think it's important if you're raising money, if you're asking for money, or if you're making money for that matter, or if you have issues with money in any way, too much or too little, because, that's the spectrum. And so just a little bit of lay of the land about what we mean by mind hacking and what we do at Self Hackathon. At Self Hackathon, we are 35 scientists. I call myself the chief mind hacker. I have 35 other scientists that work with me. We span anywhere from psychology through neuroscience, through anthropology. We have big data folks that work with IBM, natural linguistic processing, you name it. We work with a lot of people, plus different experts such as Navy SEAL snipers and professional athletes. The idea is how do we take scientific knowledge and apply it to human life? And so there are 3 major premises that we work with. The very first one is that we are living code. Okay, so how many of you are programmers? Program stuff. Okay, excellent. And so I love that. This is my favorite crowd to talk to because what we know in psychology and what we know in neuroscience that we actually are living code. And this is a code that constantly this is the ultimate amazing code that exists. And it probably is much more sophisticated, than anything we know, because it's a code that constantly wires and rewires itself. And when you look at neuroplasticity, this code, and I don't only talk about brain, but I also talk about nervous system and the body, constantly interacts with the environment and reprograms itself based on the input that it gets from the environment. So if you were to look at the human brain, you would see that it's mushy and gooey. It's in this weird state in between, being liquid and being solid. And that means it's very malleable, right? And this code constantly is programming and reprogramming itself. We also know from psychology and neuroscience that we have new brain cells being born pretty much constantly, given that you're learning and you're changing. And then finally, when you actually look about your genes, there's an entire field in psychology called psychoimmunology as well as epigenetics, which pretty much say that based on your external circumstance, your gene expression can change. So this is a code that's extremely sophisticated, extremely smart. The cool thing about the code is you can hack the code and you can upgrade the code if you wish. And so what we do at Self Hackathon is we try to bring science and tell people how can we hack this code and how can you actually upgrade this code? Because as you probably know, the very initial layer of the code or the very initial code that you write very often is not great. The first code you write might have bugs, there might be some loops, there might be certain things missing. And so what you do is you go in and you check the code and then you upgrade the code. And that's also how we see it. We came into this world with certain code that got coded very early in the childhood, anywhere, between 3 and 7, and then, the first love and the first day to school and the first victory and the first soccer match. Those are the prime experiences that shape us and create the code. And some people stay with that code and say, this is how life is, and this is who I am, and this is how the world is. And then certain people are like, okay, this is my old wiring, it's time for upgrade. And so just as with your phone, certain apps, we have to upgrade the system in order for apps to run. And so this is really how we see this system and this nervous system. And so I think it's extremely exciting that this code can be hacked and then upgraded. And so what I'm going to try to get to you and talk to you about today is the 4 ways that we actually get coded and we can hack ourselves and we can recode ourselves. Everybody on board so far? Okay, excellent. The second premise that we have at Self Hackathon is that the human mind is the most untapped natural resource. Right? So we try to go and mine for mercury and find gold and coal and oil, or, whatever, you name it. There are some people, which I know are trying to go and mine the asteroids and the moon, right? From our perspective as psychologists, that's possible. And so there are 4 ways how we get coded and how we can kind of hack and upgrade ourselves. And those things are, in a way, tied to our physical body. The very first way that we get coded is with our head. The second part how we get coded is our heart. Then I'm going to talk about our body, and I'm going to talk about the social environment, because ultimately we're social animals that live in groups, and we learn by mimicry, and we love to mimic other people, and it's very hard to go against the crowd. So I'm going to talk a little about what that means. And so we're going to start with the head. And in your head, you have more or less 7,000 thoughts a day, up to 90% of which, on average, are the same, which means we tend to spin things in our head. We tend to think certain things, which are similar day over day over day over day. In our heads, we also have assumptions and thoughts, expectations about ourselves and expectations about others. And we have rules and regulations and kind of imagination. What would happen if we broke the rule? Or what would happen if we violated the regulation? And so I just read an article yesterday that shows that children as young as 3 years old, they start observing the adults, and based on the behavior of an adult, they form a social expectation, the rule. And then the child gets angry when somebody breaks the rule. So think about when you were 3 years old and what you saw your parents. Most likely is the fear when you started setting expectations and rules of regulations of how things should have done, or how people should do things, or how you should do things. And so another interesting thing about this space is that we tend to set limits on ourselves. And I think that's very important when we talk about fundraising, because we set a limit of what's too much in a way and what's too little. And we find a golden middle that's our kind of comfort zone, and everything that goes below, especially everything that goes below what we start to engage in, is called self-sabotage, right? So people set those rules for themselves completely unconsciously based on how much money they think they deserve, how much love they think they deserve, how much happiness they think they deserve. And if you scratch a little bit, and I used to work a lot on one-on-one work with hedge fund managers and founders, you would see that there is a limit. And if a person kind of crosses that limit, what happens is like, no, this is not, I don't feel comfortable there. And so the exercise I think I would like to do, if you're up for that, and Simon told me nobody's going to have a piece of paper and a pen, which I said, it's okay. So you can take out your phone, and this is going to be very private for a lot of you, but I think this is the way to really start inspecting that code, because what happens, most of the thoughts and beliefs and assumptions are completely unconscious. And the work of us as psychologists and you as researchers and coders is to actually inspect the code, right? So if you get a job and you're supposed to fix somebody else's code, you have to see the code first, and you need to understand what the fuck that person was trying to write and what are they trying to accomplish. And so you're all surrounded on a very similar code, right? It's a psychological code. And pretty much when you look at the code of the human mind, it's a binary code. The neuron either fires or doesn't fire. Right? So it's really not that sophisticated. But it's just taken, we have 100 billion neurons and 100 trillion connections between the neurons. So that it's very, that's what human beings are, right? That emergent of all those neurons. But when you really look at the neurons, it's really not that complicated. And so most of the things happen in the background. They kind of happen in the back of the head, in something that we call in psychology conscious or subconscious. And so what I would like to at least start exploring with you is to start observing that code and understand what is your program, what are you running on, who programmed it, and how did they program it? Okay, make sense? Okay, cool. And so the question I have for you is, you can take out your phone, and this is just for you to, we're not going to share that with anybody, so this is super private, but this is just for you to start, figuring out what's in here. So the question that I have for you, I actually have 4 questions, okay? The very first question, you're just going to write a number, is how much do you think your product is worth? Whatever product you have, whatever money you're trying to raise, how much do you think your product, your idea is worth? So write a number. The second question is, how much money do you think you deserve? The third question is, if you're a VC, if you're an investor, how much money, if you were to give money to yourself, how much money would you give to yourself, given how you pitch right now? And why? Why would you give yourself that much money? And then the fourth question is, if you were to upgrade your fundraising game, your money game, your kind of psychological, mental game of money, with one skill, there was one skill that you could use to upgrade your money game, what would that be? Okay. So this is just for you. If you want to share it with somebody else, feel free. But we don't have time. I mean, I usually just go into that very, very deeply. But one thing that you will notice, and I've seen it over and over and over again, is that those brackets that I've been talking about, they're real. I mean, they're as real as there are in your head. And so what you will notice is people say, oh yeah, I'm worth like 250,000, I'm worth 2 million. And then when you really ask, how much do you really think you're worth? People will give a number, and that's usually the number how much they feel comfortable earning, and this is the number that they usually as much as they earn. And so something we've been playing with and we've been exploring at Self Hackathon with other scientists is the whole topic of money shame, and where do those brackets come from, and how we can actually hack them, because it turns out that there are brackets on both sides. So if you make too much, people feel shame about that. And if you make too little, people feel shame about that. And shame, from my perspective, as somebody who studied shame for many, many years, shame is the most toxic human emotion. and it cuts very deep and affects us very deeply on multiple levels. I don't have time to go into that, but it's fascinating research. Moving swiftly to the second part, how we get coded and how we operate and how we can hack ourselves, is the heart space. And this is really the space that's currently is the primary operating system, and it's the oldest operating system. The emotions by far run the show. And I'm a very cerebral person, and you talk to anybody in academia, and you see that still people admit that it's actually the emotions, those very strong emotions that run the show. And so, talking about money, because I actually want to frame it in terms of money and kind of fundraising. Another question that I have for you, if when I say money, what's the first association that comes to you? What comes to your mind? Just think about that. So money is X. And so what you will see is that money is power for some. Money is security. Money is love. For a lot of people, money is love. Money is status. Money is achievement. Money is freedom. So in other words, money is a means to get something else. And that's really interesting, because that really starts, the story starts unfolding when you actually think, what happens when I don't have money? What happens when I ask for money? What happens when I don't get money? If I don't get money, does it mean I'm not going to get love? Does it mean I'm powerless? Does it mean I don't have my freedom? Does it mean I'm tied? Does it mean that is inherently showing I have a low social status? There's a whole bunch of stuff happening here that happens when we actually don't get money, when we get, rejection or whatever. And so this is up for you, and I'm throwing a lot of stuff on you, but I'm trying to kind of cover all the pieces of the complexity of the psychology of money. And so one thing that I work with, that we work with a lot with people, especially entrepreneurs, is fear. And one of the major fears that entrepreneurs have is fear of failure. And it sucks. And in Silicon Valley, you go to Silicon Valley, they will tell you, embrace the fear of failure, and it's great. But let me tell you, it fucking sucks. Failing sucks. Not getting money, getting rejection, really, really, really sucks. And it hurts. And there's research showing that actually our brain perceives rejection as a physical pain. We perceive social rejection, somebody saying no to our face, as a physical pain. It's pretty much the same neurological networks between physical pain and social pain. And so one thing that we can work with on fear is there's a concept in psychology called name it to tame it. And the idea is, if you're able to name your emotion, you're able to tame it. And so a lot of people, and I work with a lot of Google engineers, and I say, what do you feel? And they're like, nothing. I'm like, no, there's no such a thing as nothing. You're probably feeling so much that your system has shut down, so you feel nothing. But most of the time, we feel something, and that intense feeling, something happens to our mind. And so a lot of people talk about fear as the saber-tooth tiger that existed, millions of years ago, and that it doesn't serve anymore, and we don't need it anymore. This is a caveman kind of feeling. From my perspective, fear is the most powerful emotion that we actually have to respect. And so the metaphor that we use is naming it to taming it. So in other words, so instead of being afraid of the tiger, you actually name to walk the tiger. And so in psychology, what happens in psychology is when the fear kicks in, and how many of us feel fear? Or fear is an issue? Fear of failure might be an issue. Yes, no? Okay, a little bit. Okay, I see everybody raising hands. Excellent. And so what happens when there's fear, what happens is there's part of the brain that kind of takes over, and then the whole brain goes into fight or flight or freeze mode. By engaging the linguistics part of the brain, so in other words, literally saying to yourself, okay, I'm afraid, this is fear, or this is shame, or this is humiliation, or this is excitement, whatever it is. The other part of the brain, which is the Broca area, kind of turns on, and what happens, the two parts of the brain, the two hemispheres start to talk to each other, which allows you to kind of calm down the entire system and calm down the brain. And so one thing that I highly, highly encourage you to do is actually naming the emotion and treat it, as an experiment. What happens when you actually acknowledge the emotion and name it? Because if you name it, you can tame it. So that's kind of the heart space. And about fear, I could talk for the next 2 months, but I have only 20 minutes, which I'm pretty sure are over now. But I will continue going. because I want to cover more. And I want to talk about the body, because I think the body is the hardware. We can, unless the singularity happens anytime soon, this is not going away, right? You are physically locked into your body. What happens is, when you look at human interactions, a human body interacting with another human body, the last thing we actually pay attention to is what people say. The very first thing we pay attention to, they say the first impression is 7 seconds. Actually, it's 0.4 of a second. Okay, it's 400 milliseconds. So it's a split of a second. And what we pay attention to as human beings is, first of all, we look at the body. We look at the body posture. And what you will see is, just by playing with open pose, closed pose, you send very, very different signal to another person. So the very first person, when I judge anybody, and you're judging me right now, and with many of you, so I can judge every single one. But I look at judgment based on your body posture, whether people are leaning in, people are leaning out. But just playing with the body, this body is the very first kind of thing that we pay attention to when we interact with another human. And let me tell you, when you pitch, and I've seen many pitches, and I train many people in pitches, this is the very first thing that comes out. How does that person come across? Just physically. Are they confident? I call it core confidence. Or are they, ashamed and scared, or hyper excited, which is also, that shows actually anxiety. So the very first thing we look at is the body posture. Then what we actually see and hear is the voice. And it turns out that in the voice, we convey much more information than we actually think we do. And so what we look for is almost like, there's this research showing that actually they put dogs into fMRI, and it shows that dogs don't really understand human language. What they pay attention is the pitch of the tone, and that's what they react to. In a way, think of humans as, in a way, dogs. We also pay attention to the pitch. So high pitch, low pitch. We can detect fear much faster than we can see fear. We can detect fear from human voice. And so the second thing we pay attention to is how people speak, how fast they speak, and what's the pitch. The third thing that we pay attention to when we assess somebody, before they even open their mouth, is the facial expression. So we pay attention to the mouth and the eyes. And what we look for is this slight smile. It's kind of like encouragement. And then finally thing, what we pay attention to, what people say. And so, interestingly enough, my husband has spoken to more than 1,000 hedge fund managers, and he's a VC. He invests in hedge funds and startups. And I was talking to him about this presentation yesterday, and he said, usually what I look for is that core confidence. And he says, too high up is this jittery hyper excitement that is actually painful to see in a way. Too much, too low is this kind of automatic behavior. And so what they're looking for is this golden middle, where somebody is grounded and present and confident what they do. Because ultimately, and many of you probably know, people invest in people. They don't necessarily invest in ideas because ideas can change. And you can see that pretty much all over Silicon Valley. And so what happens is we invest in people that we like, and we invest in people that are trustworthy. And those two elements are mostly conveyed through the body. And then, of course, what your idea is and all that stuff. But the very first impression we make is through our body. And so what I invite you to do is, A, study the people that you find to be confident, study the best pitches, look at politicians, because they're actually pretty good. Just pay attention to the recent debate between Trump and Hillary Clinton, and who came out as crazy and kind of bullying, and who came out as fairly confident. And start playing with your body, because this is really our tool of, in a way, it's a tool of work. That's we kind of forget that we are those bodies, and not only have them. And then finally, and I have to wrap up, is the others. And we are ultimately social animals, and social animal is my field of study. I do believe that, yes, we are individuals, but there are extremely powerful forces that work from the outside that shape us. And those forces are the human beings. And I recently gave a talk, and actually Simon was there. I did the closing thing for, I guess, Europas at TechCrunch. And there was a panel about growth hacking. And then this kid was saying, oh, and you send the email and you do this. And you do that. And then somebody who I found to be very wise, he said the ultimate way of growth hacking is other people, because you never know who somebody is going to introduce you to. You can know all the techniques, but if people actually don't like you, if people don't trust you, that's about it. And so you never know who you're going to talk to. You never know who that person knows and who they're going to introduce you to. And so we call it the tribe or the mastermind, which is extremely, extremely powerful. And so one thing I want to talk about is that split between people who would say, you know, amazing idea, go do it, you know, sky is the limit. And I invite you to surround yourself with people like that. And then there's other type of people who will say, who do you think you are? Go get a job, etc. And so I recently spoke with somebody from YC, very high up in YC, and they say, you know, this is a reason. There's a reason why we call, and YC is one of the best business incubators in the world. And they say this is a reason why we call it incubator, because what happens is if you have an idea or if you have a startup, it's almost like an egg, right? You need to put in an incubator and put warm light around it and kind of isolate it from other people so that it can grow. And that's why we put those entrepreneurs into a 3-month program, and we call it, you know, YC incubator, because this is where the egg is growing. This is where the idea is growing without all the toxic, you know, do you think, are you sure this is a good idea? Who do you think is going to buy this? And so what they do is they alienate this idea and the team away from this kind of blah, 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 blah world around the world, and allow it to grow. And so my question to you, and, you know, this is kind of self-reflection, is are the tribe, are the people that you're surrounded by, are they allowing you to kind of incubate the idea in, you know, nice, warm, fuzzy light, or are they poking and you know, criticizing? Because what happens is we, being social animals, we are willing to forego whatever that baby of ours is in order to, you know, gain that social consensus. And so who are we surrounded by is by far, from my perspective, one of the best ways of mind hacking. And there's research showing that actually when you look at the brain, there's really no one part that would say, you know, I am this. Most of the beliefs we have about ourselves in the world are beliefs that we gather from the people that we surround, to spend the most time with, and we surround ourselves with. And so at some point, and I've gone through this many times, you got to upgrade your friends, and you're going to upgrade, you know, the people who you surround yourself. Okay, so I want to sum up, because, you know, I can go on forever and ever and ever, but the summary really is that success is a mind game, and it gets played here. And in order to play this game well, in a way, we have to be aware of 4 major elements, which the first one is the head and the thoughts, and you have to inspect the code. And really, I invite you to become an investigator of yourself, kind of like a programmer of yourself. Try to understand what is the code and who is programming you, because ultimately, so if we're not programming ourselves, somebody or something is constantly programming us. The second one is the heart, and it's that emotional intelligence, the emotional equilibrium and equanimity. Then is the body, making sure that you not only have it, but you own it. And then finally is others, and leveraging others and using actually others as your growth hacking kind of machines. I think that's it. I just turned my screen again so I can hear you guys. If there are any questions, I'm happy to thoughts. Feel free to tell me afterwards.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? You can? Excellent.
Yes,
all right, we're gonna take a break, and then we're gonna move over to the panel. But thank you so much. And yeah, that worked pretty well, actually. We got a little bit of packet loss here and there, but on the whole, yeah, it was a good connection. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Okay. Say goodbye. Bye bye.
Happy. Great.
Thank you. Okay, guys, going to take a little break, and then we will get cracking with our expert panel. So what I'd like to do is I'd actually like to, we're going to have 4 seats up here, but I'd actually quite like to mix it up a little bit and do a little bit of a fireside chat with Jonathan Marshall from, well, you are a serial entrepreneur with a lot of varied experience from the BBC, all the way through to Archiva, which is highly relevant with regards to connectivity, and we can talk about that. And you are also an active investor, par equity. How would you describe par equity real quick?
So briefly, it's a kind of mini crowdsource. We're a syndicate of over 100 people in a network, and it means that you can then not just access the capital, but also access individuals.
Is it like an angel network?
Yes, it's a syndicate of angels, and usually you will take one of the investors on as a non-executive.
Perfect.
So you'll end up getting that angel.
Hold that thought. Right.
We'll talk about that more.
So guys, take a quick 5-minute break. Grab a chilled drink, beer, I think got cider, I'm not sure, some soft drinks, and then we'll reconvene. So, Ben, Jonathan, Gary, 4 seats. We'll do like to keep an eye on the time, because otherwise, there we are, we might run and run and run. So, who in the room is actually actively fundraising? Okay, who is going to be looking to see funds within the next 3 to 6 months? Okay. Who has their sort of funding strategy in place in terms of, debt, equity, crowdfunding, the 3 Fs, friends, family, and fools, rather cynically. Okay, I don't know if I have exactly, but so, funding is vital, and also the psychology when you go in to prepare yourself for pitches, either one-to-one pitches or even just pitching to a boardroom, around a board table, and you're working half a dozen or even 2 principals. It can be seriously intimidating, let alone some of those accelerator programs. At the end of the program, you are expected to pitch in front of a room of, in some cases, IoT Startup now have a room of about 1,000 people. I think Seed Camp and Techstars, it can be seriously intimidating. And even EIE, has anyone done that before or been involved? I would imagine that can be pretty painful as well. So what I wanted to start off with is really kind of a one-to-one with Jonathan specifically to talk about things from the investor's perspective in terms of their feeling. And when I sort of speak to you, I'm sort of assuming that you're speaking as an individual and also as part of consensus with regards to the other members of the syndicate, and your view in terms of what value you feel you can add and what your appetite is with regards to hardware companies right now. Is that something that you view as being a kind of a very sort of sexy, exciting sector, or is it a case of, it's too many risks, we'll stick with what we know best? Maybe that's a good kind of place to start.
Sure. Okay. I'll take one step back and tell you why I'm here first. And also, there wasn't a memo to all wear blue at the front. I don't know why that kind of happened.
That was the semester.
He didn't get it.
Just kind of happened.
Yeah. You didn't get it. All right. Well, Gary,
anyway, there might be something in that. I'm going to rewind side just to kind of give you where I am in my head, why I am where I am. Won't take too long, but it's going to look like a brief whiz through my CV. I kind of fell into this because I've always been at the cusp of creativity and technology. That's going to be my thing. I started off in music, but I like the technology of music, and I found that naturally kind of got me to a place where I ended up working for the BBC, and specifically within research and development at the BBC. And that was a great place to work. I really enjoyed it because we got to work on effectively small skunk work style projects where if they worked great, they made their way into public consumption. If they didn't, that was fine too. So there was a bit of a try and see culture. What the BBC did while I was there is they started up a new initiative. They called it Innovation Labs at the time. And this is back when the BBC still had some money. And we used to tour these around the country. We came to Scotland, we went to Wales, went all over the place. And we invited companies to come in with an idea that could become a new media-based project in the BBC. Now this was 10 years ago when new media really was new media. I think BBC now call it future media because it wasn't new anymore. Anyway, the point of that was I got an insight into the process of how people came with just an idea and yet could leave with a thing, a proper commission and an idea that could properly become an addition to BBC's output. And that's a really important thought I want to leave you with, is that anyone can have a thought, and any thought can turn into a thing. And it really doesn't matter. The process we can argue about, the thought to thing is a really important thing. However, that BBC did me a disservice because by introducing me to that, I suddenly realised that I wanted to be the other side of the table, and I wanted to be the thought to thing person. So that kind of started me on a journey. So I decided to leave BBC, start trying to work out what it was I wanted to do. Again, I knew it was something to do with creativity and technology, and so I dabbled in music, composition stuff. I dabbled in home automation things, also into kind of interactivity and TV. All of those things kind of had businesses behind them. Not all of them worked. We talked about this idea that it's okay to fail and pick it back up. But all of them, I guess, took me on a journey of where I've got to now. So to tell you about probably the one I want to kind of concentrate on the most was this idea that I'll talk about the Connect TV idea, because Connect TV was a successful exit, well, the main successful exit I've had in terms of being a major shareholder. And that was important because we did something that we weren't expected you could do in an environment that we were in. So I'll give you the example. We were trying to become a national broadcaster, but there were at that time two of us over a table having dinner saying, how do we do this? Because usually national broadcasters need to have massive amounts of backing and funding, they need to be able to buy bandwidth, they need to be able to get an Ofcom license, and all these things are massively high barriers to entry for most people. But we started thinking about, well, hold on a minute, why are all these things the assumed way of getting in? Are there any other ways to start broadcasting without having to spend millions on a broadcast network, or without having to spend a fortune on programming assets? And we thought of a really neat technological way of being able to launch a service with a minimal outlay of bandwidth, yet still satisfying all the criteria that made sure you get an Ofcom license. So by the end of the dinner, we'd hatched a plan, we thought we'd hatched a plan, that got us a process of being able to launch a live TV service, which sat on Freeview, sat in the EPG alongside all the other services. But our neat thing was, we didn't actually transmit video pictures. We to tell it to go and get those pictures off a streaming service on the internet. Now, streaming over the internet was nothing new, that was being done already. But what was new was the fact that we had no app, we had no complicated interface to get into it. We just sat on the EPG alongside BBC, ITV and others. So your number of clicks to entry was one, it was the channel number. And that was the aha moment, and that was the breakdown or the disruptiveness of the technology we had, was we knew we could do it, and nobody knew you could do it at the time. Now we knew once we did it, the cat was out of the bag and we'd have fast followers. So we made sure that we did as much of it on stealth as possible until we had everything lined up. We had our content owners who had the content, we had our Ofcom license, we had our EPG listings. And then when we launched, we went from 0 to, I think, in total about 40 channels within the space of a year. Now some of these channels were hidden behind portals, so in reality we had 9 physical channels in the EPG. Some of them were just one channel, some of them were portals to other channels. But that was very fast, phenomenal growth, and that's what got us into a space where we were in a situation of, right, do we take big investments in to get to the next level, or do we go down the acquisition play? Now, my personal choice at the time was to go down the acquisition play for the very simple reason that I had other ideas, and I didn't want to roll the dice too many times, because it's, as most business owners will tell you, most times you roll the dice, it's double or quits. It's not often that you get to go back to the last stage you were in. And that's got me to where I am today, because that's put me in a position now where, having had a successful cash exit of the business, I wanted to get back into the world of, right, how do I redo what I did at BBC over 10 years ago, and start working with small, new, innovative companies. Because I love that space. I love working with people who are genuinely excited about a new product and add real value. And the value I want to add is not just either the money I can bring or the money my network can bring, but it's the ideas or the experience that we can bring from having had startups of our own.
Can I just talk about that issue of exit? Firstly, who did you exit to? Was it a good exit? Did you do the resting investing thing post-exit, or did you just literally get a lump of cash put in your bank account and given a golden parachute? How did that exit work out for you?
I've talked about exits. We were in a well, I think it was a fortunate position because none of us planned to exit. By the time we were at the exit point, there were 6 of us working full time. I don't want to say employed because none of us were making any money at the time, but we had a sustainable business. If you accept the fact that none of us were.
So you were still kind of on sweat equity, even up to the point of acquisition.
Yes.
Cool.
But we were also.
That's a tough journey.
But we were also turning over close to £1 million.
Yeah, but still, if you're not putting food on the table, you've got to survive somehow. It's either credit card debt or family or savings, and that's a very scary prospect. So in terms of the exit strategies as an investor rather than entrepreneur at this stage, as your kind of par equity hat on, I think exit, are you guys thinking about exit at this point? And then I'd like to sort of throw it back to Jonathan to ask him the question of how important is it to consider exit strategy from the get-go? Is that something that comes?
I think, as Jonathan pointed out, it came to them as a surprise. And having, we've been around 5-6 years, and whilst in business plans, at some point go, this would be our exit. You need to be open to it, and it be it's not a bad thing. It's not a good. It can be a good thing. It can be a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's something that you ideally will have to make a decision about at various points. And sometimes it might be no. And sometimes it might be actually this is the right thing for us. Or something. It might be we have no choice but to do this. There are different things. But I think if you're not at least considering it open to it, or at least know what you should be doing in that situation. Again, the thing of stepping back and going, well, if someone was to approach us now, what would we do with that information?
But so often you see that goal asymmetry, which leads to conflict, because the entrepreneur, I've seen this a lot, and I've seen it particularly in academia, where you have one or two co-founders who created a company based on their PhD research, and they end up setting up a company because they develop some cool technology, and also it almost becomes that classic lifestyle business, and they make possibly the mistake of taking on money from outside parties, and it completely changes the complexion of the company. And so the investor's saying grow, 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 scale, 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 10x return ASAP, and the entrepreneurs are saying, the business is me, I am the business, and we're inextricably linked, and I'm enjoying the journey, and I don't want it to end. So you're happy just bumping along the bottom, not growing, not scaling, and not looking for an exit. You could quite happily continue running the company for another 5 or 10 years, but that does not suit your matrix, right? So how
one of the best bits of advice I once heard is the best time to sell a company is when you least want to.
Yeah.
So actually, the time you suddenly think I need to sell it now is actually probably not that attractive a time to sell it, because you've probably hit one of the blocks that will happen to you. And either you have to work your way through it, then you're attractive again, as in terms of an investment opportunity, but you also won't want to sell again because you're back on that roller coaster on the downhill bit at that time. So there's a challenge there. You've also identified that from an exit point of view, the time an investor wants to exit is very different. And that may not be sooner, it may not be later. Right. So let's take the sweat equity argument you just said at the beginning. If you're close to the end, you will want to exit as soon as possible because it's literally that, or the house gets repossessed or something like that. In which case you may want to sell earlier than an investor does. Or the flip side might happen is if you're having fun, the investor wants out because they're out there the limit he wants to be at.
Or the CEO gets fired because he is doing a great job running a lifestyle business. It's not reaching the requirements of the investor.
I think, again, well, for me, it's that, so you've got these two positions that may be at opposite ends, but if you're communicating, if you're in touch with investors and you're discussing these things as you go, or at least flag them up, going, well, as opposed to coming out in the blue and going, well, at this point we're going to need this as an investment committee. If it's a dialogue, then that doesn't become a standoff, it's
things
so
change, circumstances change.
And as they change, you need to keep communicating that, and that's something that you're not always good at. We've been in situations where things are changing. What do we do about this? And you try and work through it. And actually, the best thing you can do is pick up the phone or do an update and just go, look, this is what's happening at the moment. We just need you guys to know.
Things do come from left field. I've been in a situation where the chairman was taking me out for a nice dinner, and this is a company that we're just about to go public. So we're scaling the business. We're £150 million. Okay, it's an internet company. It's not a hardware company. So it was a .com. And I thought, this has got to be something good because he's taking me out to a very nice dinner and so on and so forth. And essentially, he gently came to it. He said, look, as a co-founder, you need to leave the company now because let the big boys take it from here. And I just felt utterly devastated. I was young and inexperienced. It was probably the best thing for the company that I did step down. But I felt so betrayed at the time, and there was no conversation about that. That just came from left field.
But that's possibly a negative on their side. If in the journey to that point, at some point being flagged up to you that it might be that this kind of thing might happen, then it might not be you as the best person to take it forward when this kind of thing happens. If you'd have had maybe some foresight of that would have been. So the dialogue has to go both ways.
Yeah, and the exit. Now I actually want to move over to Gary over there, because in terms of the sequencing, hardware, I would say media/digital and internet. So pre-exit, I would say pre-scale.
Yeah.
I would say you're in the position of scaling now. You're up there.
Looking to,
You're starting to hit your numbers, and you've taken a product to market and exit. So you've got the sort of the three different kind of life stages of a company. And each one of those has very different kind of challenges and issues. And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you into the conversation now, Gary, is because you spoke at one of the previous events, and you said that you were actually hand building your devices. And I'd like you to briefly explain what those devices are. You've got one of the wearable devices now, but you said that because you're kind of, I would say in that kind of artisan cottage industry type one-man band, you were taking a day or half a day to manufacture, and then you were able to sort of scale to reducing the timeline. But essentially, you've still got to make that leap across that chasm to go into mass production and get it manufactured abroad and so on and so forth. So
for Lightlog, the project initially started by hand building custom circuit boards.
And it's a wearable device.
And
it monitors the amount of light, like a fitness tracker. It's like a Fitbit for light.
Yeah. So it's aimed at people with seasonal affected sore and wind and blues. The original ones took about 4 hours to make. Not too complicated skills, but 4 hours sitting there soldering.
Yourself?
Yes.
Actually tinkering away and making them. And you've got pre-orders, you're sending these out, and you're making them yourself.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Can anyone else in the room relate to that, by the way? Okay, yeah.
So the scale point happened, I moved to doing custom PCBs, so you can get a custom PCB manufactured. $1 a board for a little.
Is there a minimum order? Because that can be expensive for a startup entrepreneur. 10,000 devices. You know,
well, so yeah,
shipping container.
So I was doing hundreds. So that was like $1 per board for 100. And you can get it cheaper than that if you really have it out. But for 100 devices, that's really not a big part of the bill of materials. So I could then, at that point, I could build. I think the most I built was 60 in 10 days.
Your finger's bleeding. I mean, that does not sound pleasurable.
Once you've redesigned your product so that you've got a custom PCB board, so you're not doing any hand wiring, you're just surface mounting components, which means you basically can use an oven or you can use a hot air gun, solder paste to put the components down. And literally it's, from start to end, it's less than 15 minutes. I was 3D printing cases, well, still am. A case takes about 20 minutes to print, and you just leave the printer running overnight. You come up, get up in the morning, you peel off the 6 that are on the board, you hit the button again, it's printing another 6. You do that 2 or 3 times a day, and in a week.
So how do you must be a terrifying proposition. I mean, I'd love to do a hobby startup, but I don't have the courage to do it. So I've been thinking through the process. I'm thinking, I've got to find a partner in probably China. Are they going to rip me off? You know, if they ask for cash in advance.
You don't have to, the whole China thing, you don't have to go to China. And that's...
You don't have to.
You don't have to.
But if you are thinking big, it's inevitable. And in fact, it's increasingly going to be India, because I saw that one of the big smartphone OEMs, Chinese, said it's too expensive. We're now going to get it.
But also, so on the whole, worrying about going somewhere, worrying about being ripped off. I mean, we still don't. We're not manufacturing in China yet, but there are people there to help you. There are people there that will help you. There are agents. There are people that you'll know in the community that can talk to people that they know in terms of connections. And it's.
What do you think of those hardware incubators like Highway 1? The IoT Bootcamp, there are quite a few of them in London, don't seem to be any in Scotland, or certainly Edinburgh, which is an issue. We seem to be thin on the ground in terms of early stage. No, it's not the same thing. It's just an open innovation platform. I'm talking about specifically hardware, where, for example, Highway 1, because they are a hardware manufacturer, you have access to their manufacturing facilities, their 3D printing facilities, their workshops, their prototypes, their product designers, their marketing, their distribution channel, on and on and on and on. They've got every step of the process, and they will take, usually they'll put cash into the business, take some equity, and so you are piggybacking off their existing infrastructure.
I think there isn't one. It would be fantastic. You learn things doing the journey yourself, but having, I suppose, I said, you don't have to go to China, but those where people are doing all of this, the level of knowledge that they have because there's a thing of making it yourself. I've been there, and then there's kind of various levels of scale, but being able to access the knowledge of people who are making these all kinds of things day in, day out, you have no idea of the processes and things that they're capable of. And often things will seem, you can be here and be going, well, we have, the tactile top for Scoop. all the factories in the UK, this cannot be done. And then you can speak to one person who goes, yeah, we can do that. It's just, you have no idea that knowledge base. And so things like Brink or Highway 1, they're directly inputting into that kind of connected area.
That's correct. There are at least 24 small contract manufacturers of electronics in Scotland at least having this thing.
No, I'm talking about hardware accelerators.
The same thing. I mean, what you're looking for.
Because they don't do the venturing. They will say, you find the money, and then come to us, and we will help you
if you know the people
manufacture that product.
If you know the networks, they will, and they will help you.
Well, it also depends. Depend on the cash flow of your business.
Than maybe some of the things down south. In fact, you also have, I believe, exactly what they're talking about. If anybody hears from.
That's you and McKinney. That's two parts of carbon.
Today, actually.
Yeah. What they're doing is kind of interesting, but they're doing it very much in stealth, and it's a very sort of closed culture. What I would love to do is have the investment community here have a kind of a hacker lab where you have 6-month mentoring programs, and just like a Y Combinator type scenario where lots of hardware startups apply, few get accepted, and then it's a pressure cooker for 6 months to get the hardware prototype, do the big pitch, get the second round of funding, and then you go to either do a crowdfunding campaign or you go to market at that point and you've raised a decent amount of working capital.
There's another angle that's changed as well, because I've currently got a hardware startup company at the moment. And since the last time I was dabbling in hardware, the accessibility to commodity bits of tech is much higher. You mentioned before that if you buy things off the shelf, you don't have to worry about conformance testing or certifications. Now that gets you so far, because you probably won't find the thing that fits you directly, and so we've done basically hacks using Pis or Arduinos or whatever just to get you there. But one thing that's beginning to happen more, and this has come directly from the Raspberry Pi Foundation themselves, is they now have a partnership program where you can work with them to source the same tech at the same price as they pay for it. So you get the same volume buying, but you can redesign the board. So you may say, actually, I don't want to have the Wi-Fi part of it because my product doesn't need it, or the HDMI outputs, but I want the processor and I want the RAM. And provided you don't break any of the existing stacks of software, it doesn't have to go through recertification in the same way. Yeah. And you get all the costs at the same cost as they do. You pay an overhead to have your PCB remanufactured for your own use, but all the components that go on it are then at the same cost that Pi get them at. And because they're building millions of units, that's probably the best price you get it.
What's the appetite for hardware startups versus other types of startups? Software, I'm thinking AI type businesses, big data analytics businesses, web platforms, so on and so forth. What is the appetite? If you're going to pitch an early stage seed fund or angel syndicate, and you are pitching a cool gadget, maybe smart home gadget with a twist, or some kind of wearable health device, either industrial or consumer, what kind of reception would that type of company get right now, do you think?
So I've got almost two polarized views on that, unfortunately, but I'll give you the reason behind those. So some of the investors I've spoken to say they like hardware because it's tangible, and particularly they're not particularly technological themselves. The very fact that they can pick up something they've invested in and show it and have an idea of what it is actually quite important to them. They also like the fact that there is a longer lead time to get a bit of hardware into the marketplace than there is with software. So if you are doing something that's relatively disruptive, that's difficult to protect via any IP method, and also the whole IP problem of a startup is impossible anyway, because great, get a patent if you want to, but until some big brother looking after you, you're not going to have the means to defend it. So assume that if you've got a good idea, it will be copied. And in hardware, you've probably got a longer space between your first.
What are we talking about? 16? Is it about 12 to 16 months from conception to delivery? If you're looking at kind of an e-tail platform like a Kickstarter and Indiegogo, between actually receiving the pre-orders and having the product in your consumers' hands, are we talking about 16 months or thereabouts?
There's no hard and fast rules.
Generally.
I don't know generally. I mean, for us, from reality of closing the Indiegogo to shipping, but we're far down the line. It was a completely fresh product, but that was 9 months. So
9 months.
Yes.
Well, I would say that's very good.
But
On
we're
average, that
we
is
are
impressive.
we were further down the line. We've done
Okay.
things before, as we told people, like have confidence. We were still late.
Yeah.
But at the same time, but when we and it took us less time to get our original product to market, without an Indiegogo, without a crowdfunder.
So
I think
you
we
did
brought.
it in
I think we
9
brought
months.
that. I think we brought that to market in 3 or 4 months.
Jonathan, do you what's your view on that?
So,
Cost of
Then
goods is
that's
too high.
so my worry is not how long it takes to get to market, it's how long it takes for somebody to catch up to your market. Because actually, if it's a brand new nascent market, actually being late might be good because it might be bigger.
Or by the time it actually gets into production, it's already obsolete. It's become obsolete because the speed of innovation is so rapid that consumers are like, oh god, I forgot about ordering on Kickstarter.
If you've
I
got
don't
a-
need it anymore. It's cutting edge when I placed the pre-order.
I'm genuinely the belief that
The
most
market's moved on.
innovators are far too far ahead of their market anyway. They assume that people think like themselves. So actually a bit of delay, if you're the only person in that space,
Yeah.
may not be a bad thing.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think probably benefits some companies to have a... Now, the challenge is how quickly someone reverse engineers what you're doing and says, oh, that's a good idea. I can do it cheaper, faster, and better, whatever.
Garrett, in terms of your aspirations, do you want to scale this up? And if so, what you must presumably have some unit forecasts, demand for your product, and if you do go to market, which I'm assuming, what kind of timeline have you given yourself between actually putting it out there as a crowdfunding opportunity and actually delivering the product?
So, which product?
Well, I was going to say, are you going to stick with what you've got, or are you actually sort of hankering after
So
developing something entirely fresh and
Yeah,
new
so,
from
so
scratch?
Lightlog is an open source project. It's all published online. Technically, anybody can build one. That is still ticking away in the background, but I've got accepted to the Civtech Accelerator.
Well done, congratulations.
I have 103 days before I have to stand in a room full of lots of people in suits. But we're doing pretty well, so it's a project working with CPAN.
So presumably you're putting the sensors out there, getting data, doing something with that data that will benefit citizens of Scotland.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, so we're targeting isolated communities, people who aren't currently covered by seed systems. So all the floods that we had, all the areas that didn't get advance warnings of things happening. So we have a solution that is basically going to get them the data that they need in a timely manner to be more resilient.
Fantastic. That sounds really, really exciting. And you've got a client with a checkbook in the form of the Scottish Government to actually pay for the product when it's eventually developed, that's the beauty of open innovation rather than entrepreneurs running around like headless chickens trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. You've actually got a client with a problem, they're going to solve it, and they've got money to pay
So
you.
the biggest benefit of being
Great.
on Civtech is that you actually work with the customer. So the folks from CEPA are very close, and we meet every week.
Rather than making assumptions, or we think the customer might want that feature.
But that doesn't. I mean, we were lucky. It was very much participatory time for us. But if you're developing something, don't be scared of getting out and putting it in the hands of people and trying it. It doesn't have to be a government-funded thing. It doesn't mean that entrepreneurs don't until they bring it to market, and then it's not until it comes out and they go to DAR that they test it and it lives or fails. Get it in the hands of people.
Yeah.
Find out what they want. Find out what they do with
You'd be amazed
it.
at how few entrepreneurs actually
No, and it's scary.
go off on one. Right,
Right.
questions, and then maybe 5 minutes we'll wrap things up and get some drinks and networking. Let's just open it to the floor. You've got this amazing brain trust of resources, knowledge, expertise, in the room. Go for it. So, do you want to go first, and then we'll move over to you?
Jonathan, you give the second. Yes, I was aware of that. So I said I had two polarized views of hardware. So the first one I gave the example of is having something tangible, and also from an investor point of view, it means I've got a bit more security. The couple of hardware projects I'm involved in, I know it's going to take a while to catch up with what we're doing. The flip side of that is
Does that give you sleepless nights, by the way? Thinking, they're out to get me. I know it does.
It definitely did with the connectivity, because I knew that once we'd shown it was possible, there was nothing, even though we'd taken a patent out on it, there was nothing to stop someone else following up. But, sorry, it's a flat sideline. The patent actually did turn out to be useful, because when we were acquired by a building type company, they then have a legal team that can defend it
Yeah.
if they want to do that. So there's
That's a whole other conversation, perhaps. Yeah.
IP.
But to come back to the question you had, is, so yes, I like that tangibility of it personally, but there's the obsolete argument as well, is you want to make absolutely sure what you put out isn't either some hardware flaw in it that needs to be hand fixed. And again, a personal experience I had of that was a set-top box I developed with the company, and it wasn't able to automatically upgrade over the air. I had a problem with it. So that's usually the problem. That's usually what you do. Is, don't worry, we've got this over the air up. Because in TV you can't guarantee they're all plugged into
Connectivity is always a nightmare.
So you have this system where you could upgrade over the air, except that part of the box was broken. All the bits to be broken, that was the bit.
Yeah.
And you've got customers already
Well,
deployed.
we had a warehouse with 10,000 of these.
Ooh. Okay, so it's nice.
That was basically
Justified,
the
very much
entire
so.
management team
Ouch.
to the warehouse,
Jeez.
plugging in USB dongles and rebooting each. Because that was the other way you could upgrade them, is you could put a firmware in the USB.
The low-tech solution. Does that answer your question?
So there's a worry there that you created something that is going to sit in a warehouse and not be usable anymore. Your example of iPhone connectors changing is a very good one as well. You're just going to make sure that if there is any kind of elasticity in the specifications, that you've got a way to do that out in the field before you do it.
Contingency planning, people. Okay, go ahead.
How much equity do you sort of decide to give away? And more of the sort of alternatives to giving up?
As little as possible, in your case, as much as possible for the investor.
And how do you know, like,
Fights for every last percentage.
I have a different view on that. There is this defensive thing when you start off, and particularly coming from a personal. Investors are intelligent. They want to demotivate you. They don't want to run you into the ground. It's not in their interest.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking
not-
about the other extreme, where they're well beyond that point of taking too much. So, of course, it's all about kind of compromise, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of an answer, I've got a number in my head. I can answer this question, but it's not my job to do that. The question was, at an early stage first round,
Yep.
and at what point you're pre-money, your prototype stage, you've got an MVP, just an idea, just a business plan. At what stage are you? You're looking to raise your first round of funding. What kind of percent should you be thinking about giving away? Right? So
there's two metrics I have in my head that I'll share with you. Again, I don't have an answer. I don't have a figure because it's absolutely different for every business. The first thought I'll give you is I personally would rather have 51% of something than 100% of nothing. And the control is more important to me than the percentage. So if somebody's going to come along who's going to double the value of my business, they can have,
that's a very significant
but they can have 49% of it.
Because the stock table is almost irrelevant. It's the clause in the shareholder agreement.
That's the important
really
thing. The
drill into.
number is not necessarily.
Yeah.
It's the how you write the.
So how you categorise your shares is then important because yes, say you do give away 49%, you want to make sure you're not diluted anymore. So you may want to look at different classes of shares. Now I'm not saying that's the right percentage. I'm just saying there's a thought in your head is the value, coming back to the point before, it's the value that person adds to your business.
Yeah.
And your bargaining power, let's be honest. If you're Mark Zuckerberg with an awesome kind of war chest of seasoned advisors, I mean, that's why he was able to do what he did. Whereas if he was just a lone first-timer with not much of a clue, then and no bargaining power, then the whole complexion, he would have been ousted and fired a long, long time ago. But that's an extreme example, really. What percentage did you give away first round?
First round, we gave away about
99.9?
No. We gave around about 40, just over 40%.
40%
First round, but prior to that we'd had to negotiate out the IP from the university, and that involved 20% stake for the university, so there's a balance on that. But that was many rounds ago, and we're still incentivized, and we're still working.
You wouldn't do that the second time around. If you exit, you've got the credibility of having an exit, a big exit, let's just say. Like the FanDuel guys. Next time they go to raise money when they eventually exit, they are going to have this golden aura around them, and they will be able to name their terms. Whereas if you're a first timer, whole different ball game. So I suspect. I'm thinking more 15 to 20 typically. 40 sounds a lot.
I'm going to say the second perspective, so I'm going to perspective as a business owner, the perspective from an investor point of view is largely dictated by what they can maximise in terms of their tax efficiency and any incentives they get from from government.
In terms of match funding.
Match funding, so whether it's grant
yeah.
funded, things like EIS and SEIS, constraints on how much an individual...
It's like free money at the taxpayer's expense. I mean...
Well, if they put too much in there, they're not eligible anymore. I forget the exact percentages, but as a... I think
it's 150 for SEIS.
SEIS is 150, but there's also a percentage. If you want more than a certain percentage of the company, you don't get that tax relief because you're deemed to be too controlling.
Yeah.
So they're the numbers that are important for investors to be involved in. So again, use those as a metric to make sure, and make it look attractive to an investor, because if you say, well, the government's covering any potential losses and offsetting any capital gains, well, as an investor, I'm far more like for like to invest in the company with those metrics than with those incentives than those without. The other thing that I think is really important as an investor early on to realise is if you do give away too much too early and get diluted down so far to a certain extent, you'll not qualify for entrepreneurial relief. So if you are lucky enough to get an exit, which is significant value, you don't want to be taxed at the highest tax rate. So again, double check percentages, but you need to give a certain percentage that says you were first list a number of conditions. From my memory, you need to be an officer or a director of the company. You needed to have 12 months worth of invoices going back, so you can't just exit without an order book going back at least 12 months. And there's a certain percentage of the company you must own at exit.
So get some good
a huge
advisors.
difference because that's only 10% tax you get on the whole cash amount.
Yeah.
Which, if you want to reinvest your money, by the way, you can then use to offset any capital gains on any future investments. So
you want someone, of that ilk as a mentor or a offered by hands-length advisor to give you that kind of advice, because often you can't pay a professional advisor because it's just too expensive. When you go to
it's
start,
a very
right?
specific area of skill, and I found that most accountants don't know all these ins and outs. And if you've run your own business or invested in businesses, you find yourself knowing more than most standard accountants do. Now, don't get me wrong, I found some very good accountants now who specialise specifically in startup businesses, and that would be a bit of advice I'd give a small business. As soon as you're starting to get money in or looking at investment, get an accountant involved early, because you don't want to then realise you're not. We were at a point with Connect TV, for example, where our exit was getting dangerously close to one of those three conditions not being satisfied. And we had to make sure that if it happened any sooner, we wouldn't have qualified for the 10% we have as the director for the period of time it has been. Now, we were acting as in that capacity, but because it wasn't the company's house.
And then the trouble is you get in a situation where you're running the business to suit the tax needs of the investor, and that can be very detrimental because the tax strategy is actually leading the company strategy of what's best for the company, and that can be...
In that situation, it didn't change anything the way the company was running. It was just, what boxes do you need to tick from an administrative or a governance point of view?
And they want to see people succeed. There's this kind of aggressive, there can be in a way like stuff. It's like, there are a lot of people who genuinely want to see you succeed. And if they don't, fine, screw them, it doesn't matter. But, speak to people, seek some advice, and it doesn't have to cost you anything. And there are a lot of people who are incredibly experienced and know a great deal, network, speak to people, and ask for the advice, Ask Jonathan after this and say, I could do with a bit of a steer on this.
Yeah.
And most people will help you out.
But just take it almost with a pinch of salt, because even when I dish out my advice, I always say, look, that's not a silver bullet by any stretch. That's just one person's life experience, that may have worked or not worked for me. So it may be very different to you. Every situation is different. So just go with your instincts, take the advice, value it to a certain extent, but don't take it verbatim and think, right, I've been told I must do it this way. Just let it shape and influence, but ultimately you are the master of your own destiny.
You're like what?
Yeah. Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up there, because that's 40 minutes we've been chatting away for. So I think, just drinks, keep the conversation going, and the next one is blockchain here, actually in this building, and IoT on the 27th of October. I'm looking at you and you're like, I don't know. Sounds about right. Anyway, IoT Scotland, it's IoT SCT, so IoT Scotland or IoT EDI, whichever.com, you'll see, of course, all the meetup events coming up and the dates and whatnot. Just go RSVP, free as always, and look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you. Thank you very much for